So, based on that understanding, the newer questions in the examination were added regarding what kind of flaps will be used, right? So, to address those questions, I thought that let's cover a topic where we can at least cumulatively talk about various flap designs. What are the benefits? What are the challenges? What are the complications? And what are the common procedures where the flaps will be needed? And in those procedures, what are the flaps that you would prefer, right? So I hope everybody here is now ready today to learn about the various principles, some techniques, and especially why certain flaps are preferred somewhere and why not. After this power session, as promised, as always, I will be giving you a short quiz, which will also be published on my Facebook page or my Facebook group. So if you haven't joined my Facebook group, please join the Facebook group. The quiz will be published there. And then let's get ready and then start preparing for this topic today. So in today's class, I will be talking about mostly the kind of flaps and techniques that are important in your third molar surgery, then your impacted canines, how to expose them when you are doing orthodontic traction, and your basic periodontal surgeries. So these are the three targets that I intend to cover in today's class. And it is important that you know and understand the oral anatomy, the classification of the flaps, where each flap is indicated, right? What are the common flaps that are used? What are their names? How they look like? What are the incisions? Where those incisions are given, right? And then common flap designs, which would be shown as diagrams as well, right? And their fundamental principles. What are the principles? What are the indications? And where, in which procedure, which flap you're going to use. So I hope everybody is ready to learn those various techniques and indications. So now why you require to raise the flap? Sometimes when you are referring your patients for any kind of surgery, whether it's your third molar surgery or for your endodontic surgery, in terms where your endodontic treatment fails, and suppose there is a barrier to do an retreatment from the orthograde route, then your endodontic surgery is indicated. That barrier to the orthograde treatment can be in the form of a post, in the form of any prosthesis which is completely intact and the infection is only in the periapical area. In those situations where doing an orthograde treatment, retreatment would be harmful for the existing intact prosthesis and can be harmful to the remaining tooth structure. In those situations, you would rather prefer to do an endodontic surgery. In those situations, also, flaps would be required, right? And then we have seen this is such a hot topic in ADC, right? The impacted canines, the missing laterals. Have we seen those questions? Have we seen those OPGs? Especially in mixed dentition, in orthodontic sections and discipline in ADC, we have seen consistently, right? Those kind of questions where the missing lateral is seen or the missing canine is seen. So, how do we handle the missing or impacted canines in the situations where orthodontic traction is planned? You will have to first surgically expose the canine and then orthodontically bring it down and align it. Is that correct? Now, the depth of the canine varies. It can be superficially present, it can be deeply present. Labially, it can have a lot of bone over it, or it can be very close to bone, or may just have soft tissue. And mucogingivally also, it can be far coronal to the mucogingival junction or far apical, right? too deep. So different kinds of locations of canines are also seen there, right? Now, another situation for the periapical surgery or other oral surgery is your various periodontal surgeries. You can have gingival enlargements, you can have localized recessions, and you can have generalized recessions as well. In those situations, coverage of the exposed roots are needed. Isn't that correct? That is one indication of periodontal surgery for cosmetic root coverage, which can be localized, which can be generalized. And then you can have gingival enlargements where there are pseudo pockets, excessive gingiva. Other than that, you could be doing periodontal surgery for your pocket elimination, guided tissue regeneration. Other areas in surgery where you would require flaps is dental implant preparation. That is beyond the scope of ADC right now, so I'm not covering that topic today. Repair of oroantral communications, also not. So our main focus in today's class would be to focus on the flap types and the procedure indication types in third molar surgery, which has been already asked in the exam, and to stretch the boundaries, which we always do with Winspur. The idea is take what they are asking and then go at least 2 steps ahead so that you're preparing for the further unseen and the newer questions. So third molar surgery flaps have already been asked. I will go ahead and also explain you different canine exposure techniques to bring it orthodontically aligned, because one thing is that the impacted canines and the impacted laterals are becoming extremely recurringly asked topics in the exam. And then we'll also briefly talk about the various periodontal surgery flaps. I'll talk about the localized recession, generalized recession coverage, and pseudo pockets. We'll also talk a little bit about modified Widman flap as well, which is a true pocket elimination flap, right? So let's start with the third molar surgery flaps. And you all have seen the options of triangular flap, envelope flap, trapezoidal, semilunar. All these options could be given to you, right? The answer is straightforward and yet complicated in its way that there are multiple options available. These are ambiguous topics. There is no one straight answer based on the patient's situation in the mouth. The surgeon may have to decide a different design type based on the anatomical landmarks as well. But in a certain way, there were certain studies which were conducted to reveal which flap gives the patient the maximum comfort and the most comfortable healing. Now, there can be various designs which have been suggested, and the options given could be envelope, triangular, modified triangular, your semi-lunar. These are some of the options that you could be given. Now, basically, the most preferred flap designs in the third molar surgeries are your envelope and triangular flap, right? And there are certain limitations and complications of both the kinds, but one which works the best for the patient is your triangular flap. Although the immediate post-op swelling is slightly higher in terms of your triangular flap, but the overall healing, right, with the primary healing and with the lack of morbidity after healing, post-op morbidity has been known to be least also with the triangular flap. Yes, there is some experience of increased swelling, but the primary intention healing is also most with your triangular flap. It leads to minimal attachment loss and minimum defect formation. So with your envelope flap, what happens is most of your envelope flaps were noticed that there were some defect formation and attachment loss happened to distal side of the second molar, and it would heal with secondary wound healing rather than the primary wound healing. Primary wound healing is closely adapted healing and leads to minimum tissue loss. Whereas secondary wound healing is where the gaps are created and the connective tissue comes in and open wound, and that leads to some wedge shaped defects. So it was noticed that the envelope flap was associated with those kind of defects more than your triangular flap. Dehiscence is one of the complications which was linked far more in your envelope flap compared to your triangular flap. Limited tension, limited defect formation, limited attachment loss. So if you're given all the four choices, you know the correct answer now. Is that concept number one concept clear for everyone here? Which is the preferred technique for your third molar surgery? Absolutely correct, Sanjeev. The chances of dehiscence, the defects, the attachment loss, and the secondary healing, all these are less with your triangular flap. Now, for definition, you must know how they both look like. Now, this illustration here, it depicts the envelope flap. So it is given along with a circular incision that you would give with your from the first to the second molar, and then it doesn't have a vertical releasing incision. You see, there is an incision that follows it. It relieves the flap, but it goes horizontally posteriorly into the ramus. It doesn't have any vertical release, so that is why it is just an envelope flap. Yes, the benefit, one of the benefit is that it has a very wider base. If you see, if you have the top of the flap, but because you're not giving any vertical incision, so the base of the flap is quite wider. So yes, the circulation is quite there, and that is why limited post-op swelling. In triangular, the only limitation is the post-op swelling. Patient might say that it was a little bit more, but then again, it subsides within the 24 to 48 hours. So envelope flap will go into the sulcus of the first and the second molar and go posteriorly, relieving this flap into the ramus without any vertical releasing incision. So yes, because it goes from the first molar into the ramus, the wideness is there. You can have good exposure. You can keep the top wider because the base is still there. So circulation will never be compromised here, right? And it has a wider base. It assures the vascularity up till your wound margin. But still the limitations are that it gives the wound dehiscence, the breakdown, and that leads to the permanent periodontal damage there. The attachment loss is seen, the wedge-shaped defects is seen behind the second molar. So would you remember these three complications, the major complications? The periodontal damage, the attachment loss, the dehiscence, right? And the predominant healing happening through the secondary intention rather than the primary intention. So now this is your envelope flap which you will use for your third molars, and its challenges discussed, and you got the visual idea as well. Is that correct? So far so good. Am I making myself fully clear here? All the concept making sense? Now, the next and the preferred flap for the oral third molar surgery is your triangular flap design and its modification, right? So the triangular flap, again, the incision is coming from your ramus to the distobuccal crown edge of the second molar. So here the area which is exposed is predominantly from the second molar to the third molar area into the ramus. doesn't necessarily has to come into the first molar region. And you have to give straight perpendicular incision obliquely. That is why the triangular term. So the releasing incision here is your oblique incision rather than the straight line from the from your sulcus to the mucogingival junction. Instead of the straight line, this goes obliquely and thus gives it the name of your triangular flap. Now the variation, the modification is also that it is lingually based on the lingual side of the removal or for the removal of your third molar. So there are two versions available. One is the buccal aspect and other is the lingual aspect. So one, again, a learning point is that triangular flap can be given both sides, buccal as well as lingual. The lingual triangular flap is known as your triangular flap modification. Okay. Now the advantage and why it is the preferred flap design for your third molar extraction is it reduces the incidence of wound dehiscence, and also when there is constant nicotine exposure, especially in smokers, the healing is better here because in smokers already the healing is compromised. So this is your oblique incision, the second molar area and into the ramus. So the distal relieving incision is almost same as that of your envelope flap, but anteriorly it gets distinguished from your envelope flap by this oblique incision, which can go into the mucogingival junction and beyond to release the tension. And this also in modification can be done lingually. Similarly here, it can be modified triangular flap for removal of the third molar. So sometimes when the third molars are tilted lingually, right? When the third molars are tilted lingually, you may prefer the lingual approach for the extraction of the third molars. And then you would prefer the modified triangular flap for the third molar extraction. So if any of these two options are given in the exam and it's asked which would be the preferred flap technique for your third molars compared to your envelope flap, semilunar, trapezoidal, and your triangular, now you know the answer. Both of these techniques will be superior to your envelope flap. Only challenge, and in the exam the question may get asked like you can be given an SBQ. It could be about the third molar surgery and the preferred flap technique could be asked in the exam, and then following up professionalism and health promotion question could come up. What would be your post-op instruction to the patient, right? So what could be the post-op instruction to the patient? In this case, we are expecting slightly higher swelling and pain post-operatively. So the management and education of the patient should be accordingly. And there was no difference between the post-op complications when you compared lingual or the buccal triangular flap. In between them, there was no difference. But when you compare it from the envelope type, the lingual flap or the triangular flap showed lesser post-op complications compared to wound dehiscence, attachment loss, and those kind of challenges. The only limitation that you will remember, which is clinically relevant and in exam SBQ wise, which can be asked as a concept, is that you will expect slightly higher post-op swelling and pain, and you will manage it by educating the patient, right? And pain can be managed by analgesics. Now that sums up how the third molar surgical flap indication concepts and questions can be asked in the exam. So please tell me before I move to the canine management now, because those will be quite new concepts. Before I begin that, please tell me, does the third molar management and the flaps and the differences and the deeper concepts of indications, limitations, challenges are clear? The modifications? Is that part clear? So now let's move to the management of the impacted canines. Now this is getting again very repeatedly asked. The recent orthodontic articles which are released in the last 2024 in the ADA journals, all the Australian dental journals, ADA lectures, all the ADA meetings, they have been focusing on the importance of general dentist by being the primary healthcare provider who identify the missing permanent teeth, impacted permanent teeth, and then they timely need to make referrals so the patients can get timely assisted help, and then space can be maintained if in future an implant is planned or an orthodontic treatment can be given to close the space if your missing teeth are replaced by the adjacent teeth and then prosthetically altered to replace those teeth. Whatever kind of treatment is chosen, either by replacement through prosthesis or gap closure through ortho treatment, all these kinds of managements initially has to be identified and assessed by general dentists. Your patient's first time would be coming to you for retained primary canines or gaps, or that this tooth is not erupting, and probably primarily that would be happening around the mixed dentition, right? Or in early younger stages when it is a permanent dentition but the canines did not show or the laterals are missing. So for your correct and timely diagnosis and for your correct and timely referral, you must know the kind of like incidences and prevalences of your permanent canines impactions, permanent laterals, how much they can go missing, right? So based on your position of the canines, they can either be deeply impacted canines or they can be superficially impacted canines, right? And it's one of the very commonly impacted teeth. Almost 1 to 3% of the population, the prevalence is 1 to 3% of the population presenting the impacted canines. So that's quite high percentage, right? And you have to first assess the accurate location of the impacted canine to determine whether you can surgically expose it or you have to remove it. Now, anyone here who's done the ultimate advanced file with me and done the concepts with me, remember we have done these concepts here. Why is it so important and what is the most important factor to know when the canine is impacted? It is the location. Number one. Why? Because that's the number one point, first of all, that whether you can even surgically expose it to bring it in the alignment or you have to remove it. Because not all canines can be done and brought into the alignment with orthodontic traction, right? So the location of the impacted canine is the most crucial factor. Anyone here who remembers this concept we have done in the ortho section during our ultimate advanced file discussions as well. The position and the location, Garima, right? We have done that. So the surgical exposure or the removal is the one of the, there are two possible managements. If you have impacted canine, either you can bring it down, align it orthodontically, or you have to remove it and then think about the prosthetic replacement or then closing the gap with your premolar taking that space. Agreed, right? So if these are the two possible managements, there must be some indicator, right, which will help you decide, or the orthodontist or the surgeon decide whether we can bring it into the orthodontic alignment or not. And that number one point, and which ADC loves to ask you, is that the location and position of the impacted canine. So complete accurate position within the bone, whether it's positioned labially or it is located palatally, they dictate that. Now, both the canines labially and palatally can be treated with orthodontic traction, given that the position should be comfortable. It should not be interrupted by any adjacent roots. They should not be horizontally positioned and too far deep into the bone where you cannot expose it. So if the prevalence also gets asked, of all the impacted canines, which I said is 1 to 3% in general population, 1/3 of the canines are labially positioned and 2/3 are palatally positioned, right? Arpit, we have done this concept also. It's a directly asked question in the exam as well. So knowing these prevalences are also important. Now, for your treatment, now we are going to talk about which you're going to surgically expose. And surgically expose, and then with orthodontic traction, you're going to bring it down into the alignment. So there are two different methods. One is an open technique, other is your closed technique. Now, everyone, this is extremely new for some, other than if you are already an orthodontist. But it might be new for a lot of us here today. So please let me know if everything is getting very clear to you. There are very important two techniques, surgical techniques, to bring and expose the impacted canine and then bring it into the alignment. One is known as your open technique, other is known as your closed technique, right? So now when the open technique is done, you will be required to do some flap procedure to make the canine open into the cavity. Now, the name indicates what is going on. So, when you have an open technique being followed, that means your canine will remain open in the oral cavity and your orthodontic traction will happen by bonding, and the canine will remain open and you're bringing it down. Closed technique by definition means that you're exposing your canine surgically first, putting your band there, orthodontic banding is done and the wires are attached, but then the flap is put back up again and it is closed again with your flap, sutured. And then the wire does the orthodontic traction but underneath the mucosa. Everybody understood what's happening here? One, you can see the band and the wire in an open exposed canine. Other is the closed technique where you expose the canine, surgically create the window in the bone, but then put the flap back. It's like having the impacted tooth back into the mucosa again. And the wire is still coming out. The band will also remain under the flap, and then slowly with traction, canine will come out. Now, do you see the relevance of closed technique where you will suture it back with the flap is the fact, and you do understand why are we putting gingiva back? Because we want to preserve that gingiva. In which situations would you want to preserve that gingiva? When it is very deeply seated canine that you cannot compromise all that mucosa and gingiva. So you want to bring the canine down, but you still want to keep all that gingiva in the labial position. So close technique, where you will suture the flap back, is indicated when you have deep seated, or which is also deep in the bone and which is also more apical to the mucogingival junction. Clear for everyone? Because there was no attached gingiva. So to preserve the gingiva, you will do a close technique in deep impactions and where the canine is located far apical into the mucogingival junction. So this is an important criteria to determine whether an open technique is being done or your closed technique is being done. If your crown or even the cusp of your canine, Kuljeet, none is better than the other in this case. Nobody is asking you which is better. There are indications here in the terms of what is the position of the canine that will dictate whether you're doing open or you're doing closed. Here, it is not like envelope and triangular flap discussion like your third molar situation, Kuljeet. Here, the discussion is based on the canine location, whether you do open technique or you do the closed technique. Is that absolutely clear for you, Mukuljeet? Number one, very good question, but I hope it's clear now. So the first criteria to decide your open versus close is the labial palatal position. When it is far more labial and has to be close to the mucogingival junction coronally. Less bone above your canine labially, and mucogingival junction position should be that the tip should be closer. So you see, this is if this is the canine tip, and if this is your location, so suppose this is your attached gingiva. Can you see this very faint shadow here? Very faint shadow, which would be your attached gingiva, and that would be your mucogingival junction then, right? Below which you will have your loosely lying alveolar mucosa. That's your mucogingival junction where the attached gingiva meets the loosely lying alveolar mucosa. So if your canine tip is very close to your mucogingival junction, even if the tip is slightly close and positioned coronally, now tell me what would be indicated. And the bone above it, the canine also should be minimal. This is your open procedure then. Now provide your open procedure, what you got to do is you have to first raise the flap. And for that flap, you are raising it with the vertical incisions. Can you see these vertical releasing incisions? After you will raise this flap, it would be a full thickness flap. You will be exposing the underlying bone because without exposing the bone, you cannot remove that bone and expose the canine. Is that also correct? So this is a full thickness flap and you raise it and you see bone underneath and then you remove the bone and that you create this window excision, right? This is your window, bone removal. Now your canine is exposed out of the bone and then you will apply the band, right? And wire and your band and your bands and the orthodontic traction will begin. That's what's going to happen. Now, because the location was very close to mucogingival junction, you would position this flap and suture this flap back on the apical area of this impacted canine. That means when you're positioning it apical and above, like above this, that is apical position, right? So if you're suturing this flap that you raised here, it would be called apically positioned flap. Yes or no, please? So when you're locating this flap back under this position of canine, you're doing an apically positioned flap and you are exposing now this canine and the traction will happen with canine exposed. What technique this will become? Right? So bands and brackets, right? So basically you're bonding these brackets and doing the fixed orthodontic treatment. You're exposed. Now you're keeping this canine exposed, and the flap was sutured back in the apical position to the canine. So it is an apically positioned flap to expose the canine, and then the orthodontic traction will bring the canine down. Open technique. Clear for everyone? Now let's go and see what are the gingivectomy technique. Now suppose if this flap, it was far more closer. Suppose if this canine was far more closer even to the attached gingiva, then in that case, you can also remove and cut off this coronal part of the flap. In this case, the exposed bone aurora, there would not be the marginal bone now. That is why you would prefer this technique where there is minimal bone around the canine and the superior surface, or the where the alveolar bone is on the top. So it is quite close there, right? The way is you will do the gingivectomy where it is so close to the occlusal surface but only positioned labially, then you will remove that. Exactly, Sanjeev. It's like gingivectomy, right? So one technique is you can remove the top portion of the flap if it is extremely close to the surface by doing gingivectomy or by doing apically positioned flap. So, Richa, you would only position it apically when there is no bone below the canine, right? It's only labially positioned. What it does is all, if you position, the benefit of apically positioned canine or flap here is that you will preserve all the attached gingiva. That is why it is not suitable in highly impacted canine. It is solely indicated where the canine is very close to the occlusal surface, but definitely very labially positioned so that the traction is still needed. Clear for everyone? It has to be far above the mucogingival junction, far more occlusally positioned, but very labially. In that case, you're exposing it and positioning it in the apical situation. This is the apically repositioned flap, and there is, see, no bone here because you have created the bone defect. Whatever bone was there, you have created that window defect and you have exposed the canine. So all the bone above the canine has been removed. And as your canine will supra erupt, will your new bone formation not happen? If you're wondering, Aurora and Richa, how that defect will be compensated, tell me now. All the bone that was above the canine. That is why the case selection is extremely important. The keywords in the history should be labially positioned, relationship with mucogingival junction, and that overlying bone is completely removed. And your flap is positioned apically, all the attached gingiva you're preserving. And as your canine is brought down orthodontically, it moves slowly, the new bone deposition will happen. Is that right or not? When you do orthodontic supra-eruptions, when you do your orthodontic repositioning for implant formation to improve the gingival contour or to form more attached gingiva, you have read and heard about those treatments, right? It has been asked in the exam also, right? If there is lack of gingival contour, sometimes before planning implants, you do some orthodontic extrusion of the teeth which has to be removed to improve the gingival contour. to improve the gingival topography there, to increase the width of the attached gingiva by supra eruption. And even in the normal natural cases where your opposing teeth are missing and your opposing teeth supra erupts, whenever the teeth supra erupts, right? What happens? The secondary bone formation happens or not? Or does the tooth come out and exposes the root? That is that how the supra eruption works? No, when it is done timely with limited amount of minimal forces, then the secondary bone formation also happens. Isn't that right? This is exactly what will happen with this exposed canine. Here, your benefit is you remove the minimal bone and you preserved all the gingiva. And when with traction the canine comes down here, what is happening? The new bone formation starts. Isn't that right? No, there will be no recession because the bone will continue to form here, Lata, right? There will be no recession on the adjacent teeth because papilla preserved, right? And with the canine erupting, new bone formation is happening. Now let's talk about very interesting closed eruption technique. Let me just explain both of these techniques and then I'm going to show you a table which will compare these two techniques hand by hand and you will know what are the indications, what are the implications and techniques. Now, closed eruption technique terms used would be highly impacted canines, deep-seated canine, lot of bone to be exposed, lot of height for the canine to cover. So you cannot remove that amount of bone, right? So highly impacted canines, where the crown tips are also pointing extremely mesially or distally, in those cases, closed flap are more comfortable because entire bone is not getting removed above canine. Okay? So in closed technique, you are only creating the window and then positioning the flap back. When you reposition the flap back, this canine and the bone window will also be covered by the flap. This hole will not be part of the flap. Clear for everyone? This is just diagrammatic representation here where you are seeing this canine with the flap. But in the closed technique, when you reposition the flap back after exposing the canine from the bone, when you put and suture the flap back, can you imagine it is now the pink flap covering your canine? So can you imagine that now the canine is exposed out of the bone, but still not in the oral cavity because you have sutured it back with the flap? Is that imagination and concept clear for everyone before I proceed? That you did expose the canine. It was far more apical to the mucogingival junction. You could not remove the bone entirely. That's why you only expose the tip there by removing some buccal bone. And then you sutured and you applied the bracket and the wire, but you put the flap back. So you did put the bracket and the wire, then you put the flap back. So what are the steps? Raise the flap, remove the bone, bracket and wire, and put the suture back and flap back and suture it. Understood? The steps are clear. Raise the flap, remove the bone, expose the canine, bracket and wire, put the flap back in its original position and suture it. So now your wire would be visible. Your wire would be visible. Now look at this. Now, suppose if this was minimal bone on top of this canine and the flap that I raised and I position it apically here. If I place the flap apically here, right here, so this would become open apically position technique. And with the bracket and the wire, it will continue to come down. But if suppose this canine was far more above the mucogingival junction, here you see this is the mucogingival junction, can you clearly see? And the tip was crossing above that. So this was the bone around it. This is the bone that is removed here also. Now, as it comes down, the new bone is going to perform. Now, these are going to be done by the oral surgeon. But now, Javaria, because the OPGs are being given, ADC is already asking you the location and the position and asking based on the OPGs, ADC is already asking you whether the surgical exposure and the traction is the advised treatment or the complete surgical removal of the canine and the closing of the space orthodontically. Right, Javaria? You have seen ADC is now constantly asking you the surgical managements, even if you're not doing them. These questions are already getting asked in exam by showing you an OPG, showing you the clinical pictures, and they're asking you what will be your advice to the patient, how will it be managed, surgical exposure and orthodontic traction, or space closure by surgical removal of the canine. Now, because we are getting asked this flap techniques for the third molars, this is the next boundary to your impacted canine questions that the exam will ask you whether you will done the open technique or the closed technique. How will you choose it without reading this, right? Isn't that right, Javaria? So how are you going to answer those unseen questions if you face them in the exam? This is how you will answer them by complete understanding. So now this, if you position the gingiva here as an apically positioned situation and you expose the canine and as it erupts, the new bone formation will happen around it and it will all be covered. All your gingiva would have been preserved. So your attached gingiva thickness would be enough. There would be no compromise. This non-keratinized mucosa will not have to compensate. So you would have preserved your gingiva and minimal bone reduction because it was close to this mucogingival junction. So you only kind of remove the labial bone here. Clear for everyone? Now let's look at this table here, which will help you immediately understand and compare these two. This will give you a very organized look. And now any question asked, this table will help you answer all these questions on open eruption and the closed eruption technique. Now, open eruption has two variations, gingivectomy and apically position. Gingivectomy means where you're cutting off the gingiva excessively that you raised above the canine. And apically position is where you're repositioning the flap apical to the exposed canine. How would you decide? Well, in gingivectomy, tooth is labially placed and it doesn't have any covered bone. So you don't have to expose the bone and remove the bone. You simply cut off the excessive gingiva around it. And in apically position, it is labially placed, but there is still, okay, you're not seeing the table? Wait. All right. So in gingivectomy open eruption technique, tooth will be labially positioned and will not have any bone. And in apically position, tooth will be labially placed and has only thin and little amount of bone present. And in closed eruption, crown would be deep in the alveolus, so there is a lot of bone compromise. That is why we are not removing the bone. Right? Vertically also, gingivectomy you will do when it is far more coronal to the mucogingival junction. And apically position, your crown is still apical to the mucogingival junction, but in closed eruption where it is significantly deeper and below your mucogingival junction. Then gingivectomy can only be done when your underlying attached gingiva is still present and you can remove the superficial gingiva where you have minimum 3 mm of your attached gingiva present. And apically position is done when there is inadequate gingiva. So mesiodistal positioning also, when you have very mesially tilted canine, then you would not do your closed eruption because it would be too blind, right? So basically open versus closed is the position of your canine in relation to your mucogingival junction, labial position, how much bone is remaining, and how far above closer it is to the occlusal level. And now in exam, OPGs are given to you, canine crowns are visible, which are impacted, and the question is asked whether you will surgically expose it or you will surgically remove it. This question is already a past exam question. Now, if the ADC, as it is bringing the newer questions and adds a newer question to this, shows you the level of the canine on OPG and asks you whether it would be an open eruption technique or a closed eruption technique, would you be able to answer based on the position of your canine and its relationship with the occlusal level? Now that's how you decide your open and closed technique for your canine eruption. Now for your periodontal flap surgery, although if you are enrolled, you have done this entire class with me where I've talked about all the periodontal flaps techniques, where I've talked about free gingival graft, coronally positioned graft, lateral pedicle, double papilla graft, apically positioned also we have done, Widman also, modified Widman also we have done. So if you have enrolled with me, you have done that entire class on all the periodontal flaps and their indications. And in the thousands and the past papers, MegaMaster and Ultimate Advanced File combined, you have learned and applied those flap indications to the particular questions. So the basic indications, and these are your basic questions that are asked in exam. If not complete technique is asked, still ask, why do you need to raise the flap for the periodontal surgeries? What are the indications? So you would be doing it when you're requiring root surface access. What is that procedure? Can anyone name here? Why would you require root surface for instrumentation? What is the name of that procedure? So you will choose that in the options. Root planing. Will that be correct answer? In root planing and debridement, you would require for the subgingival removal, right? And the root planing technique, guided tissue regeneration. And when you are having your recession, localized areas or your generalized areas, for that also you would do the flap surgeries. For your new attachments, vertical bone losses are best treated with guided tissue regeneration. Is that correct? So you raise the flap, you put the membrane and your grafts, and then put the flap back. That's for your guided tissue regeneration. The contraindications for periodontal plaque surgeries are poor plaque control, uncontrolled systemic diseases, heavy smokers, and poor long-term prognosis of the teeth. They better go for extraction. Now, this is also an exam concept. where the patient was to be educated, he was smoker and he required periodontal treatment, and options were given. Would you refuse the patient periodontal treatment because he's not stopping your smoking? Would you do that? So basic primary periodontal debridement should not be refused to a patient just based on the fact that he smokes, although the education must be provided that he must control smoking, right, for the better healing. But the periodontal surgery would be a contraindication in heavy smokers, and a temporary cessation must be done like you would do for your implant surgery, right? So now in exam, if the variation happens, this is a variation of that question. Lata, everyone, Kuljit, you remember those questions that I'm talking about? The patient is a smoker, you want to do a periodontal treatment and then prosthodontic replacement. And or one of the options says you will refuse the patient the perio treatment because he doesn't stop smoking. Well, the basic initial debridement should not be refused, but if you're planning periodontal surgery, smoking cessation should be advised, because otherwise the wound healing would be detrimental, would be complicated. Now, the full thickness versus the partial thickness flap are again based on the fact that what kind of procedure you're doing. Whenever you need to expose the underlying bone, you would go for your full thickness flaps, where you completely go into the incision where you're hitting the bone, right? And then the sulcular incision and the vertical releasing incisions exposes the bone. That's your full thickness flap. And when your incision goes only till the partial connective tissue, not hitting the bone, and you leave partial connective tissue on the exposed bone and does not expose the bone, that's your partial thickness. So the indication for your partial thickness flap is fenestrations and dehiscences, right? Where you do not want to expose the bone and treat the defect by grafts. Then in terms of your free gingival graft, where there is insufficient attached gingiva and you're preparing the bed to receive the graft, but that would be on your connective tissue. The other indication for your partial thickness would be in the double papilla or your lateral pedicle graft to cover your localized recession defects. Is that correct, Lata? When you do a lateral pedicle, you would do full thickness or partial thickness? Would you take a pedicle from one tooth and displace it to the adjacent exposed tooth by exposing the bone of the graft site, donor site? No, right? The donor site will still have the connective tissue and the epithelium will grow above it. And the lateral pedicle would be, that is why partial thickness flap. Sanjeev, Lata, the lateral pedicle will be not full thickness, it would be partial thickness. Can you make lateral pedicle full thickness and expose the bone on the donor side? Tell me. No, right? You will not expose the bone on the donor side. That is why partial thickness on the lateral pedicle and double papilla. In coronally positioned flap, Nandini, also partial thickness, because when you are positioning it coronally, you are kind of exposing the part where you're bringing it up from. Let me show you the image of coronally positioned. Coronally positioned incision you will give below the defect, make it released, and then you will reposition this flap by moving it coronally, and it would be a coverage flap. So coronally positioned flap is indicated for larger areas of recession. So the question gets asked, the patient has multiple areas of recession and wants cosmetic coverage. What is your answer? Apically position, lateral pedicle, double papilla, or coronally position flap? What's your answer going to be? The patient has multiple exposed recession areas. Options given are coronally positioned flap, lateral pedicle, double papilla, or your apically positioned graft. And he requires coverage. So when you require coverage in multiple exposed areas, you perform coronally positioned flap. So after giving this releasing incision into the mucogingival junction, you see this incision is given below the mucogingival junction. So it is loose mucosa, alveolar mucosa. You can raise it, right? It moves because it's not attached to the bone. So when it moves, you're bringing it coronally. So will you be exposing the bone here? Tell me. Will underneath this darker area, do you think it's exposed bone? Or this is partial thickness flap and connective tissue which will heal by epithelial migration? So this darker area is a partial thickness as well. Got your answer, everybody? This would be a coronally positioned flap with partial thickness raising, and then you put the copac here, and this heals by secondary healing, that area where the connective tissue was exposed. So Nandini, this would be a partial thickness exposure, right? You will not be exposing bone underneath here. Clear for everyone? This is your coronally positioned flap, everybody. It led to the coverage of the recession in the multiple sides. Now let's talk about apically positioned. Apically positioned flap, as the name says, is repositioning of your flap in the apical position by raising it. So once you raise this flap, now apical position flap is a pocket elimination flap because you're repositioning to the new levels of bone. After recession and periodontitis, bone loss occurred and the level of the bone is far below the CEJ. You see that? This is recession. All the gingiva which was originally lying here, now this would be the probing depth. So it would be a true pocket. Now, no matter how many times you debrided it, it again got difficult to cleanse by the patient and again recurred. But the point was to keep it cleansable. But the patient is not bothered with the aesthetics and doesn't want the exposure. He says just eliminate the pocket so it becomes cleansable site and I can maintain it. He's not concerned with the aesthetics. So if aesthetics are not concerned, you're not bringing it up and putting the coronally positioned flap with the graft, right? So you will reposition the gingiva with the newer levels of the bone. So that is apically positioned flap. It will eliminate the pocket depth and the gingiva will not grow back because now it is positioned with the adjacent newer levels of the bone. So probing depths would be reduced. It will become a cleansable site. Deep pockets will be eliminated. The drawback is it exposes the root surface. The benefit is it preserves all the gingiva. You're not doing gingivectomy. So yes, the sulcus depth is increasing, but all this previously present gingiva is getting preserved. So all the attached gingiva width is getting preserved. And that's the benefit of your apically positioned flap. Eliminates the pockets, preserves the width of attached gingiva. Yes, the sulcular depth increases, but the area becomes cleansable. Maintaining oral hygiene becomes easier as the pocket depth is eliminated. The drawback, yes, the root gets exposed. So it's not a cosmetic procedure. Would you prefer it in the anteriors? No. You can prefer it in your posteriors. In multiple anterior recessions, you would go with your coronally positioned graft. And if the bone loss is so much, then you can also use underlying autogenous graft with it, which will lead to more attachment, right? So you can do the regeneration as well as coverage both. Coronally position takes care of the coverage. If you want attachment also, which is connective tissue, PDL kind of attachment, then you need to get a graft as well underneath. And modified Widman flap is the basic flap done for your root planing. It doesn't completely eliminate the pocket. Pockets usually form again because you're repositioning it back to the same site. So it is just a root exposure or the bone exposure procedure. So your modified Widman, you're doing only to expose the root for the root planing technique. And the free gingival graft only answer to your minimal attached gingiva. Where there is lack of attached gingiva, you perform your free gingival graft. And when to prepare the receptive bed for your free gingival graft, you will use your, again, partial thickness flap at the receptive site. Arpit, yes, anterior teeth, you would prefer modified Widman because it doesn't expose the roots. Eventually, it is positioned back. So for your root planing and debridement, surgical debridement, modified Widman anteriorly, it doesn't give you coverage. It doesn't compensate because it's not positioned at a higher level, right? Arpit, modified Widman is positioned on the same level where it was. So it is not a coverage procedure for recession. Modified Widman is done when you have true pockets and no recessions for your debridement. Clear for your doubt, Arpit? Modified Widman is true pockets, no recession. Then you do it, raise the flap, do debridement, reposition it there. That is with no recession. Coronally positioned flap is a cosmetic procedure for the root coverage in multiple teeth. Got this? Free gingival graft is a graft for your minimal attached gingiva where the attached gingiva is lacking. Right? Apically positioned graft is complete true pocket elimination process, making the area cleansable. But because it exposes roots, it is done in posteriors. It also preserves the attached gingiva. All these four kinds clear. Full thickness, partial thickness clear. Lateral pedicle, double papilla for the single tooth recession coverage clear. Now you can ask me your questions here because I've covered the most important three surgeries and their related surgical flaps. The third molar, envelope versus triangular, triangular and modified triangular, wound healing comparison of the both kinds. Then coming to your canine surgical exposure and eruption using the open technique and the closed technique, the indications of the both, using gingivectomy or apically positioned flap in your open canine exposure technique, right? And then your periodontal flaps, full thickness, partial thickness, localized recession, generalized recession, free gingival graft for insufficient width of attached gingiva, coronally positioned graft for your multiple root exposures and coverage, apically positioned graft for pocket elimination and preservation of attached gingiva. Then comes your lateral pedicle, the double papilla for localized defects, modified Widman for surgical debridement and repositioning without any existing recession. Clear for everyone? So that would be about the today's flap procedure class and session. Now to test all the information that I provided you, I will be posting a short quiz on our Facebook group. Please join it if you haven't already. And then you can attempt those questions, and I will be posting the answers in a day or two once everybody has attempted. And I will provide you the rationale, the explanation behind the answers. Right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being the fabulous audience. And before the examination, we will meet again next week. I will announce the date so that before going to the examination, what are the last minute tips and tricks that you can apply during the examination days. So my next session would be around how to handle the questions, the concepts we have spent months preparing, how to make sure that during the examination you achieve your best performance, and you attend the examination with concentration, the optimum, the knowledge should be translated into the answers that you attempt. The post-op pain and swelling is slightly more with the triangular lata compared to the envelope flaps. But because there are permanent damages more with the envelope flap, that is why the post-op complications are accepted and still the triangular is preferred. So Lata, I hope I answered your question as well. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, everyone. And those who joined the Zoom, please make sure that the Tuesday public sessions would be on the Facebook Live only, so that I'm reading comments only on one side. Otherwise, it would be difficult to follow comments on both the platforms. Thank you so much, Kulji. Thank you, Lata. I hope you gained a lot and it helped you and gave you that clarity, because sometimes we, as general dentists, we get that fear of understanding the surgical aspect of the treatments. But please know that with slowly understanding and what's going on, because we all know the basics, and based on the referral that is required from us, unless we understand the challenges of the procedures, how are we going to identify these challenges in the maintenance phase if we don't know what's an annular flap, what's a triangular flap, and if the patient comes, there is a wound dehiscence or there is a defect formation. As a general dentist, during the maintenance phase, how will you identify these challenges if you're not aware of these techniques and their indications, right? So during the ortho treatment also, if you referred him to the orthodontist and he performed a closed eruption technique, and then in between appointments, he comes to you for the maintenance, and you go, okay, where this wire is coming from? So you should know that this is a closed eruption technique, right? So as a general dentist, during the maintenance, you must be aware of all the procedures, right? And I hope this lecture gave you understanding of the surgical, and your fear of understanding the surgical techniques was lifted. So you don't have to be an oral surgeon to still feel comfortable and still have an understanding and talk to your surgeon and orthodontist in a well-informed manner with what's going on with your patient. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for being the fabulous audience. This is recorded. So for the enrolled candidates, it will be uploaded on our app, and if not, it will be available on, if you're not enrolled, it will be available on our Facebook page for good. So you can come back later and watch it if you miss certain parts of it. Thank you so much. Have a great day ahead. And I'll see you on Thursday for our internal class, and then very soon before examination for the last minute tips and tricks. Thank you so much. Have a fabulous week ahead, and I'll see you.